HiSec BuyBack offers 90% JITA anywhere in HiSec. Simply go to hisec.evebuyback.com, appraise your items, create a contract, and get paid quickly.
This is Talking Stations, a show about EVE Online. I am your host, Artimus Albosa. Joining me today on the show, we have Domanark.
Hello.
We also have Shen.
Hello, hello.
And the puppet master, or engineer, behind the scenes is Manaskar. He might talk a little bit later, but you probably will just see his beautiful avatar on your screen. Today on the show, we've got some news for you. We're going to give you a quick recap of some recent events. We're also going to run down the tiny little patch that happened today. We're also going to then, near the end of the show, take a look at the west side of the map. 2 weeks ago, we looked at the eastern side to get an update, a feel for the way the New World Order is changing with the fall of Pappy and all of the standings changes that occurred. Now we're going to shift our focus over to the west and see how that place is settling out. But first, there was a patch today. It's Tuesday, typically patch day. This one was very, very tiny. In fact, the only note for today is there was an issue caused by incorrect visual effects on the Golem State Police skin. I do not personally have this skin. I did not know it existed, but I do have a Golem, so now that it's fixed, I might go get it. That's it. Good to see some
What kind of
QA
issues did it
patches.
cause? Just on that ship alone? I mean, it didn't cause other issues, right?
Yeah, you know what? I don't even know. Quite personally, I saw this patch
Obviously, it
happen,
didn't break the game.
and yeah, the most annoying thing about this patch is that I had to restart the launcher. I was sitting there after downtime, like spamming launch accounts because I was farming in some wormholes, and it wouldn't let me. It said you gotta restart your launcher before you can load up your accounts because there's a new version. Man, come on.
That's been the last several patches for me. Maybe I'm the only. I don't know. Maybe I'm the only one, but. And of course,
Maybe.
I'm not patient, so I end up screwing it up and have to, clear the cache, and it's just ridiculous.
Well, I tell you what, the one thing that gets me, recently moved back into wormhole space a little bit for some of my alts, and the situation in wormholes around downtime is that the wormhole itself, there's some lag time in when it spawns relative to how quickly you can log back in. So there were times when I was doing hole control and we would log in after downtime and be sitting there panicking because the wormhole's gone, but the old SIGs were all still there. So we're like, oh crap, what's going on? Is something broken? Are we going to lose hole control because the people we're trying to keep inside the hole can scan down the new one before we can? The whole big mess. We got all sorts of paranoid, but just got to be patient, more patient than we were in our sleep-deprived states. But in any case, that's up with the patch. I do like these graphics for the patch notes, I gotta say. I would love it if your spaceships actually flew through the gates, but that's a whole other topic.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. They've gotten closer and closer as the years have gone on, to be able to do that. I always want to give them just the utmost credit to the art department and things like that. It really is a beautiful game if you take the time to look at it. When you're playing it, you don't necessarily see all that, but
Also, the griffins on the image, maybe that's hinting the next big event in EVE, which is the Caldari Union Day.
Yeah, we thought that the new Caldari Union Day stuff would get announced, or at least some bits of it would roll out today, but it seems like that did not come to pass. We'll definitely keep you guys updated if we do hear anything more about it. Shen, what are you looking forward to most about Caldari Union Day?
So I think from some hobo leaks, again, this is on hobo leaks, so it's not really 100% accurate information, but there seems to be some data size, some 2v2 battle cruisers, Caldari battle cruisers. So it's gonna be event is always good. I think it's always gonna be a change up to like the lifestyles that we have nowadays. It's like sometimes you need a change.
Fair enough.
Caldari
But
get no Union Day if they don't finish this faction warfare. That they don't push through and take it all. They get nothing. They don't get to celebrate unless they win. So
still
there's
my
harsh reward.
segue, Domanark.
Oh, sorry.
Oh man. Oh well. Great minds think alike. So if you've been watching the TIS news feed, we've had somebody in our channels whose name escapes me, and I can't look it up at the moment. But they were
Baleful.
kind enough to post some information on some fighting happening in the Caldari Gallente faction warfare zone. So for those unfamiliar, be it you live in HiSec or Nullsec or wormholes, faction warfare mechanics is an ongoing battle between the 4 Empire factions, Gallente, Caldari, Amar, and Minmatar. They have 2 separate war zones where a pair are fighting each other. This specific war zone we're talking about is Gallente versus Caldari. So you can bet the Caldari are looking forward to that upcoming Caldari event. And in this particular case, the fighting is happening in Fliet. As I understand it, Fliet is one of the 2 remaining systems that the Gallente hold on to within the war zone. It's very rare, from my limited understanding, for an entire war zone to be conquered by a single faction. And it gets even more difficult, as we even saw just out in Nullsec. Once you bottle up all the defenders into a small area, sure, it can be easy to contain them, quote unquote, but that also means that they can focus very easily on the important objectives. And so we're seeing heavy fighting taking place in Fliet between the Gallente and Caldari faction warfare sides. Lots of fighting going on, lots of ships and pods dying in there as well. And it's interesting to note, this is a graph of the progress on the defense score or something. I'm not too good on the mechanics. We'll be doing a deep dive of this a little bit later into the week. But it hasn't yet reached 50%, which I guess is somewhat of a key milestone in terms of how contested the system is. That's the term I'm looking for. So this is definitely a place to keep an eye on. If you're looking to just go out into Lowsec and get some easy frags, take a look at Fliet. And what was that other system? Fliet and Abazon? Question mark?
Tama, Fliet.
No, yeah. So the first one, why it's important is a new. So remember, I think a few months ago at this point that we had the new gate construction. So
Oh,
this system had the Caldari side connected. So this in Genesis, so the Caldari connected to this system, and this system connect to I think Amar or something like that. So it's basically the shortcut after what's that name? Nyarja has fallen. This has become the new highway, but this is a low-sec system. So it's common to see people getting ganked and basically being camped by the 2 gates basically all the time.
So
fair
with the
enough.
faction warfare, the more percentage they have get control, right? It gives them more benefits, right? They get something for that, right? They get.
I want to
There's
say
a
yes,
benefit
but
for it.
I don't have the details. Fortunately, we're going to get some experts on a future show this week. That way we can really dig into this, get the narratives from both sides, see how they're pumping up their teams, see the true importance of this. Because quite frankly, as an outsider looking in who's never participated in a meaningful way on faction warfare, if you had just told me, oh yeah, Gallente have 2 systems left in a war zone, doesn't mean much to me. Until I get a further understanding of the mechanics and how difficult that is to achieve. So we'll definitely be looking to talk to some experts a little bit later on to the week. So keep
I'm
your eye on
actually a
the kill
strike
board.
commander in the Caldari militia. So.
Oh,
But
right on.
I
So
did
then,
the system before the current system. When I first started playing the game, I did the faction warfare. It was a lot different back then. I mean, completely different actually. I loved it though. It was a lot of fun. It just not a lot of activity. You know, it definitely goes in waves, right? Where people join in, have fun, and they disappear. And then when it's famine, it's really famine. There's not much going on. So and I think the Gallente have taken all the systems at least. I think they've done it once under this current system. I believe they have. I don't know if the Caldari ever have or not.
well, I tell you what, for you
Loyalty points. Yeah, somebody
marketeers,
said no in chat. That's what I thought. You got some kind of benefit for the higher percentage you went.
one of the interesting things about the Caldari being at such a dominant state in the faction warfare zone is that their loyalty points, they get a ton of them. And all the farmers are in Caldari at the moment, which means that the Caldari faction items are plummeting in price. I think let me look up the Caldari Navy ballistic control system just as a comparison, so you can see just how quickly it is plummeting. And Domanark, maybe you could
Also look
provide
up
some context.
the Caldari cloak also. That's a very highly sought after item. So I'd like to see that price go down.
Yeah, so you can see back in January of this year, it was all the way up at 120 mil, and has just, as the Caldari have taken control of this war zone, been slowly and slowly being driven down by this excess of loyalty points, to the point where when I bought a couple just like last week, you were down at 80 mil. It's now being spiked back up, I think, because people are realizing, hey, this is probably about to flip in the other direction. And so they're investing while the price is low in order to sell it when it grows to be higher later. I'm not a market guy, so invest at your own risk.
Sounds like a dart, what do you call it? Antitrust to me. I get that, bust that stuff up. The guys who do the market stuff are geniuses. I mean, they know when to buy and when not. It's beyond me, but I pay what they tell me to pay.
Yeah, and again, we had a similar thing with the Caldari Navy cloaking device. I'm super interested in this random spike that happened back in January. What is going on here? So it was going on 20 mil, and then it spiked up for a little bit, and then came back down. Interesting to keep an eye out for.
What if a lot of Black Ops died during that time? And that's usually what you put it on. You don't put it on like on a covert op ship or a stealth bomber. It's an expensive module, so usually it's on a Black Ops ship.
And also, this is not a covered up cloak device, which means that you cannot travel with this thing cloaked. So
It's
therefore,
just a
this
cloaking device.
yeah. So this usually used on capitals, supers, and Black Ops. Yeah. So
Because it
maybe
does give a bonus to your speed, right?
yeah,
The
yeah,
negative to your speed is a lot less than a regular cloak. Yeah.
yeah. So I think mostly they're on Black Ops. Because I think a lot of times you see those kind of like dropping or hot drop supers to have like officer ones or something like more crazy than that.
Yeah, definitely more crazy price. That's for sure.
All right, definitely some place to keep an eye out for. Maybe go roaming if you're interested in the future. Shifting our focus towards the Nullsec area of space, there was an interesting kill mail that popped through the feeds. Of course, if you're tracking on the Citadel's filter within Zkill, you will notice quite a few large and extra large citadels dying down in the south, where the previous war zone was hot and all of the infrastructure is now being destroyed. But
For the
this
most
one,
part, uncontested. Just to throw that out there. For the most, they're not really exciting fights. They're just grinding through structures that are, been not abandoned officially, but people have left.
but what caught everyone's attention on this one were tens of thousands of shuttles being built that some of them dropped, not all of them, inside of the Sotiyo. And it got a lot of people thinking, who and why are these shuttles being built? But Dominark, I think you have some answers for us, don't you?
I do. I'd like to first point out some of the theories were very kind of like no one could really, until you find out what exactly was. Some of the theories that are like, well, this would take them forever to do this. Why would they do this? It makes no sense. They couldn't be doing it to sell them to drive the market. It's like they're shuttles, right? It just made no sense. Well, it turns out this particular piece of industry was actually done by a SIG in the Goons Swarm Federation. It's called Insurgent Swarm. That's about all I can say about it. And their job is just to marginally disrupt the enemy's everything. So they built. I don't know how many people were involved with it, how many blueprints were involved with it, but 47,000 shuttles, I believe, were produced in that area to drive up the index for when you start a manufacturing job. So the more things are produced in a system, the more it costs to start a job in that system. So apparently they figured out building shuttles is the fastest way to drive it up to the maximum amount that they can. And apparently they didn't stop. They just kept doing it. So it's pretty funny. I think the kill mail had the one I saw was like 2,900 shuttles were killed or or dropped
Oh
or
yeah.
whatever.
So the also the fun part about the ones dropping is they spawn and then you can eject them and reap those kill mails as well. So if we go, this Sotiyo died in PTAC ZMZV in Querious. If we go to that kill board, it is just page after page after page of shuttle kill mails where some Titan pilots were kind enough, and even super pilots were kind enough to come through with their faction and officer smart bombs and reap all of these kill mails. I'm
I was
sure
wrong
by
about the number.
now
4,954 is what I'm showing killed.
So I'm sure by now they have been properly flagged on Zkill for stat farming, which is going to be an amusing side effect of this. But it's just a weird thing with some quirky mechanics, the crazy complexity of EVE Online, where in order to disrupt some enemy operations, you get an industrialist into their group and just start building a few thousand ISK worth of frigates, which pile up and pile up and pile up, and then you destroy the structure and kill them all later. It's hilarious.
Hilarious, yeah. The level of just I don't know. I would have never come up with this idea ever. This is to me, this is genius. It's just fun. It's funny and it's fun. Does it technically fall under the stat farming? Probably, but it wasn't done for that purpose, right? It
Oh yeah,
just happened, you know.
how many pages? I don't even want to
I
know.
could just imagine the poor industrialist in that system's like, oh, I got to build me 4 battle cruisers. Why is it costing so damn much to start these damn battle cruisers? And, they had to be wondering what the hell's going on here.
Well, we broke Zkill. Sorry, Squiz.
Oh, did it?
In other news, somebody's asking in the chat, can the owner of the structure not see the industry logs? I would suppose they could. My biggest question is, are you really going to kick somebody because they're building shuttles? I mean, shuttles are useful now in Nullsec because they're interdiction nullified. They are the easiest travel ships, assuming you are good enough to avoid the smart bomb camps. So if you spread the
I
jobs
don't
out
think you
through
can
multiple
see it.
characters, might be useful. You could see taxes, can't you? So a shuttle
What
is
you
a
can
very, very
see,
small job. Theoretically, you'd be able
yeah,
to identify the taxes by how small you're getting.
yeah, you can basically see like how much is they're gonna pay to you every time you submit a job. So let's say if this, I don't think they can submit like 40,000 something like that at once. So this is stack by stack. So like if the number is up and high, you probably can you will see like you got paid tax of this structure, but I don't think you can see like what they have submitted in the structure. So maybe
It's
the owner
1,000
can
at a
hit,
time, right?
yeah,
1,000 at a time.
I think it's 1,000 at a time. So people may think this guy may be building battleship or battle cruiser, right? So it's around the same
Exactly.
time. So it doesn't get suspicious that way. So if the shuttles are small individually, but they're in good quantity, then it can be misleading sometimes to see the number.
Yeah, because Ezekiel's showing 4,900 of them at 130 million. So 1,000 is not going to show much tax. That's not going to really probably throw a big flag up because it's not a huge amount of ISK coming in as a tax because shuttles are so cheap to make. So especially you do 1,000 at a time, it's probably going to look like maybe a frigate's being built. If you can't see the number being built, I don't know what you can see and what you can't see as the owner of the station. Maybe you can see all that. I don't know.
Yeah, so anyway, that was a funny little side story that caught everyone's attention and turned out to have some really interesting mechanics behind it. So we thought we'd share that insight with you guys. Taking a more macro perspective on the structure destruction, lots of them have been dying. There are still lots of timers to happen. We haven't been notifying you of every single one that dies because it's just not interesting. But in mass, we are getting up to some interesting numbers. Someone made this fantastic website, worldwarb.com. Make your claims about spin as you will. And they are tracking losses of each side, and they have, you can see the list of participants who they're tracking. They have some information on the way that their tracking is done and who created it. So definitely go take a look if you don't trust these numbers. But it appears that the losses for Pappy have just surpassed the 100 trillion ISK mark. which is an interesting milestone just because people like round numbers, like 10,000 and 100 million and what have you. So there's
100
that.
trillion. Just think about that. 100 trillion. That's crazy.
So here's my question, and I don't expect a reasonable answer. I'm just curious on what your thought process would be. When do you stop tracking? Do you stop tracking once all of the structures are destroyed in the reconquered regions? Do you stop tracking?
I
Just
would say
straight up, when do you stop?
that's what I would go with. Once all the structures in what was our space, those regions that were ours, once those are destroyed, that's the mark, right? And then if you want to keep track of what is destroyed other places, that should be a different grouping, in my opinion.
Fair enough. Well, there's
I
definitely
mean,
got
I
some
could totally be off.
interesting stats to look at. I do love this submit a BR function. I love, like, if somebody could make this for every war that happens, I would very much appreciate it, because this seems like a super useful thing to have and to look at and to use for assessing what destruction is happening and how things are progressing. So shout out to, who's the guy who made this? Let me look him up.
The
That
guys that
guy's
make
name.
the third party apps and different stuff for free are just, they really have made the game that much better over the years, because it's no matter what era you come from, what era you're playing in, these third party apps or programs have been very, very, very important to the players. Maybe not to the game necessarily, but to the players playing the game. It's just almost, you have to have them really to play it. It's,
Indeed. And I mean, we are seeing CCP slowly over time carefully choose some of these features to bring them into game. The fitting tools, bring in the simulation fittings. We've got the upcoming skill tree changes with the skill plans and everything like that. There are probably others that just aren't at the top of my head. This one in particular, I don't think CCP could bring it in. They would be stepping on a landmine of spin and bias and people complaining about what numbers should count and what numbers shouldn't. I'm happy to leave this up to third parties to stick their neck out to do that.
well, the third party offer one thing the CCP probably couldn't do: the manipulation of it. I can come up with stats that I want to see. You can come up with stats you want to see. CCP would probably have to just, oh, these are raw numbers, raw data. We're not going to manipulate it at all. This is what you get. Kind of like the economic report, right? You just get the data. We're not going to throw at you anything else, and that would be not really what we're looking for, right? I mean, what this guy
Yeah.
created is
Yeah.
what we
Well,
want.
what I'm really interested to see, let's say if this is possible, which is in-game PR that can be created in-game, right? So let's say in this system happened around this time to this time. What are the losses by both sides, right? Because in-game you can see who is blue to each other, right? So maybe that will help, right? If let's say standing can be factored into the equation, then I think making a BR can be more clear than before.
Yeah, fair point.
McBagger is asking in chat, how's that possible? Test destroyed so many keep stars. Well, Test didn't leave this space empty. They put down a lot of structures in there as they came through. There's a lot, and to say that an abandoned structures aren't really a loss, that's untrue. That those structures did cost them assets to put up. Right now, is it a fight over it? Probably not. Right, but it's still a loss. I mean, just because you're not flying the ship you're in, if it's gone, you still lost it. Right.
Yeah, like, let's not forget that some of the alliances within Legacy Coalition intended to live in this space. So they weren't just putting down infrastructure that you need for a beachhead for a war and supporting a Keepstar chain so that you have logistics. They were putting down infrastructure to live there. So you have, like, the Brave infrastructure in Querious, you have the test infrastructure in Delve. I don't even know what was going on in period basis. We can take a look at that a little bit later as we start looking at the Dotland map. But these alliances weren't just putting down the base infrastructure you need to carry on a war. They were putting down the infrastructure to invest in the future of living in that region, which is why the numbers are so high.
And I don't know if this is part of it or not. Is the change in the value of things coming to play at all? So, because at the beginning of the war, scarcity hadn't really taken its toll on the cost of items yet. By the end of the war, it kind of has. Is that skewed into this report, or are we, I don't know the answer to that. If they're what do you call it?
If
Adjusted
the
for
prices are
inflation.
locked in?
Yeah,
Yeah,
if it's
that's a good
adjusted for inflation,
question.
I don't know. It might not be.
If I were betting, I'd say it uses the Zkill API, and Zkill uses some quite intelligent ways of determining prices based on various features.
But a
Well
Fortizar
beyond my head.
today,
So if you're
a
interested
Fortizar
in,
today is worth more than a Fortizar a year ago. So that may be part of the reason why the number is driving up on that side.
yeah, some people in chat are also mentioning cores. The fact that cores became a thing a few months after the war started is contributing to the amount of value lost on either side, depending on when the structure was lost. It may have been cored or it may not have been. So I think we've harped on that enough. Let's start digging into looking at our dotland map here. And what we're going to do today, like I mentioned at the top of the show, it's a bit of a continuation of a show we did 2 weeks ago, where we sort of started in the old legacy space, Catch, Impasse, Esoteria, etc., and worked our way up the eastern side, starting from the south. This time we're going to start just on the flip side of that, so Querious, Period Basis, Delve, maybe Paragon Soul, I think we talked about that last time, and work our way up the west. And we've already begun doing it a little bit, talking about Querious, Delve, Period Basis, and Fountain. They have been effectively reconquered by their former owners. Domanark, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I believe all four Querious, Period Basis, Delve, and Fountain are now iHub and TCU in the hands of the Imperium. I just looked through them all. I didn't see any that weren't that I noticed. I might have missed one, but I don't think I did. I looked through them all. I didn't see any.
Right on. Now, I am super curious what is happening in Period Basis. So pre-war, there was a bit of a renter thing that was kind of happening from Goonswarm. And they have since announced that they're not going to be doing renters, just the Imperium as a whole. They're not interested in the renter side of gameplay. We talked about that on a previous show. You can check out our thoughts there. I'm curious who's going to live here? What are they going to do? What's going to happen? And while I'm doing this, I'm also going to try and look up and see who lived here previously after it was conquered.
Well, Kandi's taken it over, so that's all. That's Goonswarm Federation has the solve in that system. And the way I understand it, it's just going to be for use for the Imperium members. It's really not. That's the way I understand it. And I may be totally wrong. I know somebody had pointed out that because I am a Diplo, I am part of the overall reaching leadership of the coalition, which is absolutely not true. I don't speak for the coalition. I don't speak for our alliance. I barely speak for me, right? So, but the way I understand it is that's going to be just used area to rat and mine in as people wish.
So Period Basis before basically the fall of Pappy, so two constellation of that was owned by Warped Intention, if I remember correctly, and the rest, I think, 4 or 3 constellations were owned by Test. And I think I heard, this is just my memory maybe, I think they were intended maybe after the war to rent it out, since like I think tests were located in Delft, right? As in braving couriers and the setup that they said before, and Period Bases were kind of left alone as well. So, yeah.
Fair enough. And it's also worth noting a good number of structures were also owned by Eternal Requiem. And both Eternal Requiem and Warped Intentions have now effectively disbanded. So their members have dropped to 0. The only residents, quote unquote, temporary residents from during the war that still are alive are Test. Interesting thing to keep in the back of your brain. So I think that's really all that there is to say about those 4 regions. We'll definitely keep an eye on them as they get built up. It's always interesting to see what the Imperium is doing with their industrial infrastructure, because they're known for innovating in that space. But let's move a little bit further up. We've got Fountain, of course. Correct me if I'm wrong, Fountain's still being resided by the Bastion and Inits. No new parties?
French Connection. Yeah,
yep, French Connection has a constellation there also. And of course, you have what we nicely cheer Fountain Core, which is used to be a Gangbang team and Godfathers. I think Gangbang's probably the only one left in that area that I know of for sure. Sorry, we're in your space. A was there, Free Gates, but those guys have all kind of moved on. But Gangbang team is still there, living in the NPC fountain area. And they are not a group to be ignored.
Yeah, and if you're trying to look them up on Zkill, by the way, their alliance name is reset by Zkill itself, just because Zkill needs to pay for servers through advertising, and the advertisers did not like the name. So that's, that's the thing. If you're trying to look for them, it's a bit confusing, but that's how you find them. I'm glad we brought up French Connection, because part of what I'm looking for here is not just what's the current state, but what can we glean or predict about the future state of these regions? So I think we're all pretty solid. Querious, period basis, Delve, Fountain, Imperium owned, probably for the foreseeable future. But as we go further up into the west, like Outer Ring, that's NPC, but Cloud Ring, Fade, Pureblind, as we get closer and closer to that northern regions, how much Imperium influence is going to spread up. And I think French Connection is an interesting alliance to latch onto because they do have quite the history in the Cloud Ring, Pureblind, and Fade area. They used to live there. Does anybody want to go a little bit more into that history? Somebody who maybe remembers it better than I do?
I don't know much about French Connection. I'm sorry.
Don't know much about them? All right. Well, I recall fighting, I think, both with and against them in the Pureblind, Cloud Ring, and Fade area. Especially, I think they were key players, or at least worth mentioning on a frequent basis, back when the Imperium was invading that area as it was owned by Guardians of the Galaxy Coalition. They're definitely a formidable fighting force. I would not be surprised if they perhaps start striking out further north, just because it's space that they're familiar with. It's space they lived in before. Maybe their members have a personal attachment to it. Sentimentality goes a long way in terms of motivating people. So if I were to put money on the first group to start branching out and taking space up here, I would say French Connection, just because I remember them, honestly. So there you go.
I believe they folded into Initiative during the war. Now they're back out for their own thing. Now, well,
okay.
yeah, now they're their own thing. So we'll see if they do branch out. That'd be. I don't know a lot about them, but I know that they're no slouch.
Cool, yeah. Well, let's have a look.
I know Outer Ring is being kind of not taken because obviously you can't. But I know Initiative has been doing a lot of stuff in Outer Ring.
Also up there, there's Outer Ring and Cloud Ring and then Syndicate, right? So two regions that have NPC or basically full of NPC stations. So fighting there will be a different, I think, fighting style compared to some Nullsec, like pure Nullsec alliances, places like Soft Null and things like that. With NPC stations, it's possible, let's say, to stage even without your own structures.
Yeah, and I bring those, or I want to highlight these two regions as NPC regions. Historically, you may be tempted to write them off because you can't hold solve, you can't do the iHub upgrades, there's no like serious ratting or mining as you would typically recognize it in Nullsec. But I think moons are a really big thing to think about in terms of these two regions. What moons are there? Are they valuable? And can they be successfully mined given the fact that hostile entities can just stage an NPC structure in order to assault your mining groups? Syndicate historically was a very big region in terms of contests over the valuable moons back when they were harvested by pauses and it was alliance level income instead of miners had to mine the ore. So I wouldn't be surprised if I saw a lot of action taking place in these regions centered around moon mining and the fleets trying to extract those resources. Also worth noting,
391 moons in outer.
Wow. Yeah, some serious opportunity for income if you can collect it successfully. Outer Ring, also worth noting, that's where you can source the blueprints for excavators and the like, as well as various ore ships. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
Yeah. So for the ore ships, their VPC is basically you can buy them. It's a BPO. You can only buy them in Outer Ring in the NPC stations. So some special item or this faction item that they have is the ore expanded cargo hold, some ore mining laser strip miners, and all those like special mining drones like the excavator, both ore and ice mining drones.
And what about the ships like the Porpoise, the Bowhead, and those?
So the BPO is exclusive from there, but you can copy them however you want after that. So there's
the BPO,
not like
you have to get it from there.
fact.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes
So
sense.
I mean, yeah. So the orcas and also bowhead, all the basically ships from the ore line. But I think copies in Jita are like kind of cheap right now, so it's not big of a deal if you don't want to produce them on mass scale, I think.
So I was coming into I used the fleetcom.space's Z-search function to look up refinery losses in Outer Ring, right? Because if the Imperium or their allies are going to be setting up moon mining infrastructure in that area, theoretically, they would need to kill off the existing structures. And we see that that's what happened. Test Alliance came through, or at least members of them came through back in June and July, and were clearing out some of these previously owned structures. But since July, no refineries have died in Outer Ring. So I'm going to have to get an alt out there to fly around and see who owns them, see if either Imperium allies have not taken over, so it's still all owned by Test or some sort of member of Pappy, maybe they transfer them to Fraternity, or if they sold them to members of the Imperium. I'll have to follow up on this. We maybe check in and just give you guys a note tomorrow to see what's going on with these structures, because they haven't been killed off yet. They're still there.
It's possible that when Test killed off the Imperium structures out there, they didn't put down their own. They just moved through.
Oh yeah, that is entirely another possibility. If they weren't planning on living in the space.
Yeah, because if they're going to be a delve, Outer Ring is quite a ways away. It may be tough to. If their plan was to live in Delve, Outer Ring is that's a trek. You know, if you're trying to do both places, that might be kind of difficult.
Yeah. Also, if you look at those north west side of the map, one thing that we that's commonly, I think, being forget, I think a lot of times is the ice mining in those systems. So if you look at any other places in EVE, that the regions that's owned by Gallente or the Serpentis pirate regions, I think is the fewest compared to the others. So that means oxygen isotopes is traditionally one of the highest priced isotopes out of the four should be produced here. So I think maybe with the restart of the production from Init, maybe we can see the price of oxygen isotopes to go down. I think since they can start doing some mining in Fountain, right? And then up there, you have two regions that's owned by NPC, which means that I think protocol mining and mass scale ice harvesting can be a difficult thing to do.
Great questions, great points. Somebody in the chat also mentioned we forgot to describe the Dunk salvage drones, which are also available on the Ore LP market. There you go.
Yeah. So that's also part of the Ore faction.
Named after the player Dunk Dinkle, who is now the CEO or in charge of. I'm terrible with titles. He's very important in the Brave Collective. I think he's in charge, but I don't know his title.
Supreme Overlord.
Yeah, I like that. I'm
not his title. It should be, right?
Can I be the Supreme Overlord?
Absolutely.
What am I okay. New title. Universe. Artimus, the Supreme Overlord of the universe.
You should get business cards made of that.
Oh man. Merch coming soon. Cloud Ring. What's going on in Cloud Ring? It looks like it's currently owned by Triumvirate. Did they move? Didn't they used to be in the drone regions?
Become a thing again? Oh, I mean, they've been around a long time. I thought they were all but gone. I did not realize they had an entire region. They've been around. That's an alliance that's been around a long time.
I do remember that they were up in the north fighting, I think it was Banderlogs and Pureblind for a while, but I thought that was just a deployment. I didn't realize they were trying to take space. Yeah, looks like Triumvirate is up there. They're farming anybody they can get their hands on by the looks of things. Well, those are shuttle kills. They probably shouldn't count.
And that's people will poo-poo Cloud Ring, but it's a good system to have. It's easy to traverse it. You know, it's just I've always liked Cloud Ring.
You're referring specifically to the geography of Cloud Ring, where the systems you can roam through it because it's a big circle. They're all connected.
Yep. And my first experience in Nullsec was in Cloud Ring, so I mean, it's kind of gotta, you know.
I think also where that's the name of like ring gets from, right? So that's a Cloud Ring.
Yeah, funny how that lines up. Quite the coincidence. I think it's also worth describing. We talked about faction warfare a little bit earlier on in the show, and Cloud Ring was previously notable because quite a few faction warfare alliances owned space in Cloud Ring. Uh, Memory serves, it was Pen is Out and Federation Uprising had a bit of a spat where they each had like separate constellations and they would fight each other over the space. It was a very interesting area to watch. It was also played a key role in when the Imperium deployed up north to attack Guardians of the Galaxy. They did so by anchoring keep stars and taking iHubs in the systems owned by those faction warfare groups. Or I guess Pen is Out, they're not really faction warfare. They just fly a lot in low sec. They're pirates. But I'd love to see if those groups are interested in taking that space again, but Triumvirate will certainly be worth keeping an eye on to see how they adjust to the new world order as it is. Any other notes on Cloud Ring, or shall we move on?
Let's move on.
Yeah, I think I move on.
Awesome. Pure Blind, I'm excited to talk about. I have never lived in Pure Blind properly, but I've flown there quite a bit. And the alliance that I specifically want to talk about with the ticker .ru, these guys, Banderlogs. Banderlogs, I am a huge fanboy of. I've only ever fought against them. They're Russian speaking, as you might suspect. Just the way that they operate in terms of the fights that they're willing to take, their size, they're not massive. They're less than 1,000 members, but they just have lived in Pure Blind in that general area for so long. They like to fight. They will take fights with just about anyone. They're going for content. They're not, it's hard to describe. They're the perfect mix of bitter vets and new bros whelping things in just glorious fashion. Great for content. If there was an English-speaking version of Banderlogs, I would probably join that group because they're just awesome. So that's enough fanboying about them. Who else is
They
living
also
in
have the
Pure Blind?
creepiest. They have the creepiest Alliance logo.
Oh yeah, that'll haunt you in your nightmares.
That is a creepy logo. That's awesome.
Anybody know anything about these other groups? We've got, looks like Toilet Paper, Panic. I don't know who Q is.
Yeah, I'm looking at these guys now. Toilet paper, they're pretty effective from what I understand. I'm not sure who Q is, though. What is this?
Quote Alliance.
Never heard of them.
Let's look them up on Zkill and see what's going on. Quote Alliance Evolution. Maybe? Okay. Dotland, what's going on?
It's nice to see other alliances come up and be able to get solved, especially when you have the major factions all fighting in a war. It gives the opportunity for smaller groups to go in and take solve places they might not be able to do. And once you get solve, it's it's not impossible to lose it, but it's you can scrap and fight and try to keep it.
Also, I think Frat has announced, I think a month ago, I think at this point, that they are going to do an invasion of Pure Blind. But I don't think we have seen any like real work that they've done so far.
Let's have a look. Are there any timers going on in Pure Blind? I don't see.
Not seeing any.
Yep, I don't see any orange or red like little highlight shadows behind the systems, which would indicate that they're reinforced. Looks like they have taken KQK, which I remember from way back in World War B, the original. It was a key system in terms of connecting and pushing the front further beyond Tribute and into the rest of the Imperium space. So that's definitely worth holding for the regional gate. So you'll want to like gate your supers from OTEC-Y into KQK if you need to do that for certain deployment reasons. So that's probably why they own that one. Also worth noting, we were discussing NPC systems and staging and how some space is more hostile than others. Pureblind does have NPC stations in this area. ROIR-Y is fairly common and even notorious to an extent as being a Black Ops staging system for various groups. But you can also stage from low sec too.
So Pure Blind is that they've got the Saradin and Torinos gates, which are very, very popular areas to go.
Yep. Banderlogs is well known for camping EC TAC PR and then Ewok TAC K. heavily camped systems. But I mean, if you're looking for a fight, head on over.
Yeah, so
X-7 is main stager in Pure Blind.
yeah, so just to explain like why is that always being camped or why is it so popular? So Torinos is a 0.5, which means that it's HiSec. So it's basically a gate connecting directly from HiSec to Nullsec. We do see this down the south. I think Providence connect to
Title. Yep.
Detail and Tashmerkin. I think there are two gates right there. So that's basically not HiSec to Nullsec, but often what we see is HiSec, LowSec, and then Nullsec. It's not just HiSec directly to Nullsec.
Fair enough. Pure Blind, it's such an interesting region. Is it just built well for these small alliances? I think in every single iteration of power has sort of stabilized. There has always been a menagerie of small groups living here, or at least making their presence known. Even if they didn't necessarily have the power to own the Sov, they still lived there because you could not exist in that space without having to deal with them. Is Pureblind just the way that its geography works, its proximity to Lowsec, its proximity to Jita, the NPC stations? Is it just built well for that sort of gameplay?
Yeah, so if you look at Pureblind, it's very close to LowSec and HiSec, like you said, and then there are two NPC stations right in the region. So that means any big group that wants to build up to any massive scale, if they have a big target on their back, then it's really, really hard to do that because Black Ops can undock from the NPC stations, can undock from LowSec, it can be dropped right on you. There's no question that cannot be done. So unless you have firm grip in all the surrounding Caldari LowSecs, it's pretty hard, I think, to basically conquer the land and actually start farming it on a massive scale. I mean, that's the same thing I think traditionally for Veil of Silent, but I mean, Frat came in and it's still fighting Snuff, right? So we see that those systems or those regions that are close to Empire space is have very high chance of getting dropped.
He also is very good connector to both the going south to Cloudren, going north, to Tribute Bade, and you have Lone Trek and Placid, and it's nice. I mean, you have the ability to get to a lot of different sections of the galaxy.
Indeed. Well, let's move on to Fade then. Take a look. It's often a side note, quite frankly, in a lot of the wars that take place. Looks like its current owners are, can't remember
Volta
who
and
this is.
Scumlord.
Volta and Scumlords. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never heard of Scumlords. Does anybody have info on them?
So I think they were in Pure Blind for a while. So they were in the two constellations right outside of, or right next to the Empire space. And I think there was a war, well, not a war, just kind of like eviction sort of thing happened between them and the WOMP. So that's a weapon of mass production. And the WOMP won that war, and they basically gave the land to WOMP, and then they moved to somewhere else, if I recall correctly.
Very interesting. They must have something going on between them and Volta if they're living adjacent to each other in the same region. And if memory serves, they don't even have a path in. Well, I guess they could come in through Cloud Ring, but Volta owns E9K. So there's definitely some sort of diplomatic relationship going on between those two groups. Volta, you may recall them as being former residents of Thera. Memory serves, they were big players in the previous alliance Skill Yourself, right? Am I recalling that correctly? Or at least a lot of their members joined into there to participate. And also known for recently their Ponchbent content. So they've got their fingers in all sorts of different pies, and we'll have to keep an eye on what happens up in this space. I'd be curious to see, because they deployed up here for content, at least from my understanding, from what I was told, they deployed up here for content. They happen to take space because it's valuable. If they get invaded, I'm sure they're going to fight back because they're there for content. So the fights are what they want. But I guess it depends on how heavy-handed the invaders are. Like if they get hit by a fraternity who just blobs them out of the sun, how much can they really fight back? Are they willing to take that fight because they don't really care about the space? We'll have to wait and see and find out. Yes, confirmed from the chat. This is Sutonia's group. Is who he flies with, and you'll see them flying in the Alliance tournament coming up. The feeders are this weekend. Oh, now I want to check. Is Volta in the feeders? Does anybody know off the top of their heads?
I don't. For some reason, I thought they got in.
Let's see if I can find the brackets. Pardon us on this small tangent. Volta gets auto invites due to previous victories in the Alliance Open and the Anger game, so they will not be participating in the feeder rounds. They will instead be going through directly to the tournament. So they'll just be sitting back in their lounge chairs, keeping notes on the meta, seeing what's going on. Although worth noting, if you want to root for some Talking and Station staff members, we do have Arcia, a member of the Talking and Station staff, frequently on the Sunday show, also came on the daily shows to talk about various things within her niche. She talks a lot about faction warfare, role play, that sort of thing. She is participating with the Electus Matari team coming up in the feeders. So that will be useful to have a look at. I'm being told to use Eve Prism to look up Corps and Alliances. I'm going to check that real quick.
I've never used that before either. I'm going to try that out.
And I think those spaces are also being rented as well. So the way I think that I heard Volta rents out things is different. So the big we form Volta alliances is basically their holding corp is Volta, and that's basically their PvP corp, and rest of the alliances is basically renters in that alliance. I think that's the way that I heard. Don't know if that's 100% correct or not.
Okay, well,
I was
just at the
imagining
face of
it's
it.
5 little lion robots that come together to form one giant, large lion robot, right?
Yeah, I think
Missing
something.
Voltron.
Because I think Volta is mainly a PvP focused group. That's what I heard, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of what I know about them.
Well, I tell you what, I don't understand how to use this website. Wait, a text brief? What is a text brief? It definitely looks cool. Like, whoever did the graphic design on this is definitely what I would imagine if you were in some sort of sci-fi universe like EVE Online, and you've got your onboard computer, and it's giving you a readout of all your intel. This is sort of what I would imagine. This is really cool. I'll have to dig into it and see how I can use it in the future. But as of right now, I'm going to stick to the tools I know so that we can glean some intel a little bit quicker as we wrap up today. So we've gone up the map, up the west. Now we're into the north. We talked about Tribute, Venal area a little bit 2 weeks ago, excuse me. So I guess we could just quickly round out Deklein, Branch, and Tenal. In my mind, Deklein, Branch, and Tenal all sort of meld together because from my memory, historically, the group who owns one owns all three, or effectively projects their influence over all three. At least that's my memory. It could be flawed. And taking a look at the map, we see more Volta ownership happening in Deklein. What's going on in Branch?
That would be Fraternity.
Branch is Fraternity. Okay, so it looks like Fraternity's influence has extended all the way up and sort of cuts off right here at the edge of Branch and Tribute. They've announced, as far as we know, intentions of going into Pure Blind. We would expect maybe they head up to Deklein after that and then maybe fade. I think this is definitely an area to keep an eye out for, as you have the Imperium flexing their influence further up north, Cloud Ring, Outer Ring, Syndicate, and then you have Fraternity and all of those related groups up here in the northeastern side pushing over. Eventually, they're going to clash, but even before they do, there are lots of interesting groups in the middle who are looking for fights. This is going to be a fun place to keep an eye out for. All right. Any final thoughts before we rack this on up?
I think you hit it in the head. This is going to be a fun place to watch. From Tribute on over.
Yeah, also with the big war down south is over right now. I mean, Fraternity has their hand freed, right? So I mean, they're fighting stuff, but I think they can have more attention focused on those northern regions than in Delph.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you very much for the crew, Domanark, for joining us today, as well as
Thanks for having
Shen
me.
and Manascar for pulling the strings behind the scenes. That'll do it for today's episode of Talking Stations. See you tomorrow.
Have a good night.